Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Housing Committee. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. For any members of the public watching, please note that all public committee reports, including details of specific recommendations, are available on the Council's website. Any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies from Councillor Clark with Councillor Duff substituting, Councillor Proctor with Councillor Gall substituting, and Councillor Fotheringham with Councillor Meakin substituting.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest or statements of transparency from anyone? Nope. Thanks very much. The minutes of the previous meeting, is that agreed? Agreed. And special meeting, are those agreed? Thank you. So moving on to item number 4, Housing, Capital and Revenue Budget Performance Report, and Dean Lorimer's going to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon to members of the committee. Yes, this report provides the latest update on expenditure and income on the housing, revenue and capital budgets for the current financial year. It's based on actual spend and income to the 31st of December 2025 and a projection for the remaining 3 months of the financial year. On the capital side, an underspend of 768,000 is currently projected. That's against the budget of just under £14.7 million, so a reasonably small amount of slippage thus far. But that is on the assumption of significant spend to happen in the last 3 months, particularly in energy saving, internal upgrade projects, and also assumes that a number of off-the-shelf purchases and buybacks, etc., conclude by the year end. So we're certainly expecting a fair amount of further spend to happen in the last 3 months of the year. In relation to the revenue position, a break-even position is projected on the 37 million or so housing revenue budget. That's only possible, though, by reducing the planned use of capital finance from current revenue, CFCR, in order to contain a projected large overspend on the repairs and maintenance budget this year. That reduced use of CFCR does mean additional borrowing to fund the capital plans compared to what were originally intended. And all of those projected positions in this report have been on housing, revenue and capital have been taken into account in the budgets for 26-27, which is item 5 on the agenda. I'll try and answer any questions, but I do have some more expert pals in the room to help me on any questions in detail. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Questions? Anybody? Councillor Melville.
Thank you, Convener. It's about the Invertay House project in Monteith. I've asked about this several times. I drove past it the other day, and it does look as though we're no further forward than the last time I asked. In the report on page 18, I can see that only £31,000 was spent in 2025. And I think given the need for more affordable housing, I would welcome an update on that project specifically, but also the steps that we are taking to ensure that it's delivered as a matter of priority and to speed up the delivery of these homes.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Melville. You're right that the delivery of affordable housing is a key part of our capital plan, and there has been some delays in terms of the new build programmes that we have both at Invertay and at Fraser Path and Arbroath, and I'll ask my colleague Ewan McCallum to come in on that. But as Ian mentioned, we are also looking at increasing our spend on open market acquisitions and also a buyback of off-the-shelf purchases of units from a developer in Arbroath, which will deliver additional units over and above those that we projected at the beginning of the year. But if I could ask Ewan McCallum to come in relation to the 2 specific projects that we're looking to get started on site.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, just thanks for the question, Councillor. In terms of Invertay House, the project has been out to tender. We received tenders back at the beginning of December. We only received 2, despite there being 6 companies on the framework. Both of the tenders had caveats against them. and qualifications, but we are in a process of negotiation with one of the contractors at the moment. It's a bit early to speculate whether that will lead to an award, but we are in discussions about potentially starting. And if we were to accept a tender in the next month or so, then I anticipate us being on site on Inverness House around about May this year. If, however, we have to look at a different procurement route, then that would take longer. Catherine mentioned other projects. We have started work on site at Fraser Path in Arbroath, and that's to deliver 20 new affordable units. That project's started on the 19th of January and is going well. We have in total 8 new build projects over the course of the rent setting plan, which will come on to and all going to plan. That will deliver 220 new homes in the next 5 years.
If I can just have a follow-up. On the Fraser Path, it's good to hear that that's going well. What's the anticipated completion date for that?
So I think it was 18 months off the top of my head. I can get back and confirm more accurately once I speak to the CA, but that would take us, I think, to around about August next year, I think we're looking at.
Thank you.
But I can confirm.
Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Probably one for Ewan as well. I note on page 25 in the table we have MVHR replacements, which is, I'm assuming, mechanical ventilation and heat recovery systems. And it's quite a chunky figure in there, 242,000 for these replacements. Would you be able to tell us roughly how long those units have been in service that we're replacing now? And any other comments on it you have? Thanks.
Certainly, thank you, Councillor Brays. So just to answer your question, we had a number of units that were put in approximately 14 years ago in some of our new build projects, and due to a combination of design issues and some maintenance issues, we've had to replace them. So there was legacy issues in terms of the build-up of mould in some of the properties, but as I say, that goes back to the design of the system. So we have replaced a number of these units, and I think, all being well, we would expect to get more like 20 years out of those, but we've only had 14 years. So going forward, it's going to be a part and parcel of new build projects. I think looking at those projects, I think it's questionable whether technically they were required. However, in our new build units that we're going to be building as part of this new programme, MVHR will be an essential component of that. And as I say, every effort will be made to make sure the design and installation is as it should be.
Thanks for the comprehensive answer to that.
Thank you, Ewan. Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Convener. My questions are under the revenue programme, and I note that there is a 404k underspend in supervision and management. Reports today mention staff shortages affecting performance in rent arrears, repairs and planned maintenance and other areas of work. I note that this may be due to the forthcoming service review. I just wondered if you could answer what effect has this had on frontline services, and could performance have been better if there was no underspend? How can we assure that there is no underspend in this area again? And my other part to the revenue spend was that I note that in terms of, there is an overspend in terms of repairs and maintenance, and that this will be overcome in future through our asset management strategy. Can you perhaps advise on the progress of the asset management system, along with an indication of staff time and resource spent on this so far, and when can we expect to see the benefits of this work coming to fruition?
Thanks for your questions, Councillor Speed. I'll touch first on the service review. You're right that in this year we are projecting an underspend as a result of staff slippages, and that's across a number of different teams and for a variety of reasons. We have, because we are undertaken a service review at the moment, we haven't been in a position to be able to fill the positions that have become vacant on a permanent basis, because we're reviewing job outlines and where these the kind of duties that these roles will undertake to make sure that we have the best fit for the long term. So it's no doubt that it has meant that we have been in a position where there are areas that we haven't been at full capacity across the service. The majority of these the posts sit within the assets service, and there are some posts there that we have not been able to fill despite our best effort. So part of the work that we're doing in the service review is to make sure that we have the right resources in the right places, and making sure that our job outlines and the requirements of those posts are absolutely up to date, and that we can make sure that people are focused on the priorities within our improvement plan. It's not to say that it's going to be easy in some cases to fill some of these posts on a permanent basis, because we are aware that there are some challenges in terms of posts around servicing and maintenance posts, and that's something that's been experienced not just within the housing service but across the council and within other parts of the public sector. So there will still be challenges, but we would hope that by making sure that we are focusing our resources in the right place, that we're better able to overcome those. In terms of the asset management strategy that you mentioned also, we're continuing to work on plans for our asset management system, and we'll be able to bring an update on where we're at with development of that in the near future. We're also working on our interim asset management strategy, which will be include the kind of short to medium term plans for our asset base in advance of getting the more comprehensive information that we need to be able to set a long-term asset management strategy. We'll be bringing a paper to committee within the next few months on the interim asset management strategy, which will be aligned into the capital investment plan that we're presenting today. And that will then feed into a longer-term strategy that we're also working on at the moment.
Thanks very much, Catherine. That was a comprehensive, lengthy answer. We'll move on to Councillor Bell, please.
Thanks. It was just a follow-up. Ewan's response there around the MVHR units. What sort of warranty would we expect on those, Ewan, for the next batch? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. I think any construction works are covered by an initial 12-month rectification period, but over and above that, we do stipulate requirements for guarantees. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what they are for the MVHR systems, but I will check and get back to you. I think it will be around about 5 years, though.
Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I think this is probably another Ewan question too. It's about the conversions on South Street and Forfar. They seem to have been going on for a very long time. And as always, we're desperately needing these bigger houses. So I was wondering if there is a timescale. It says that the programme of works is progressing, but it would be quite nice to have an outline timeline for us. Thanks.
You're correct. There has been delays on that particular project, and there's complications found when we got into the properties as well that have resulted in them being protracted. They are due to be finished within the next couple of months. I will get back to you with a specific date. I'll ask the CA and I'll get you an exact and up-to-date date. Is that okay?
Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. This might be an Ian Lorimer question. On the 7.5 of the report, which is on page 10, with regards to our energy savings going towards net zero carbon, whilst it mentions within it that we've got just over £250,000 of an underspend, there's a bit of detail there explaining as to why, and to do with the lower the tenders. But then it also mentions grant funding from the Scottish Government for the Scottish Housing Net Zero Heating Fund. So in turn, does that mean that that underspend is actually potentially likely to become a saving because of the funding?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Gregg. You're right that we are projecting an underspend in this financial year, and we have also been successful in receiving quite a good funding package from the Scottish Government towards a programme of works at some of our sheltered housing complexes. So that means that overall the works to improve that complex will be less than we had anticipated in our capital plan. So in effect, that is a saving on that specific project because we've been able to attract that funding. Yes.
Councillor Boyd, sorry for the wait.
No worries. It's a question on page 40. I'm noticing that there's a estimated developer contribution for the Carnoustie project. Can I find out who that developer is likely to be? I'm a bit like Councillor Melville. I'm a little disappointed to see that these houses are not going to be starting until at least 2027 with the housing crisis we've got. And the Carnoustie does have one of the highest waiting lists for council houses.
Councillor Boyd.
Yeah.
Councillor Boyd, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're actually on the wrong report. You've jumped ahead one.
Oh, my apologies.
Okay, sorry. So we'll get you in on the next one.
Then.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, convener. I was going to comment on table 3 as well, and Councillor Speed's already commented on the repairs and maintenance figure. I was actually really pleased to see projected overspend because I think there's a lot of catching up to do after various problems with the contractors, etc. So really pleased to see that. We're also projected to overspend on loss of rents, but I think it might be worth asking about that because I think actually the trend for voids is coming down. So it would be good if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. You're right that in terms of our overall performance in voids, we are seeing an improvement, and the position in terms of the number of voids that we have now compared to where we were at the same time last year shows an overall improvement, and that's despite the large number of properties that we are now holding as void in Brecon following the devastating effects of Storm Babette. The loss of rents in particular in the way that it shows in the revenue account includes the council tax payments and the standing charges that we're paying on those properties in River Street. So that is the reason for that overspend. So although we are now starting to see good progress in terms of our performance, we're seeing a negative impact on the loss of rent income just because of those charges that we're continuing to have to pay for those properties.
Everybody finished with questions and we'll move on to comments. If there's any, Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Just going back to table 7 and the overspend on new build projects. This is a really good thing, and we've just heard about the steps that we're taking to buy homes, delivering more affordable homes than initial projections. That's really positive. It's really, really positive. We do need to be doing everything we can to increase the affordable homes and the delivery of them here in Angus. That means being flexible, it means building, it means converting, and it means buying. So I hope to see more of that, and well done.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Melville. Any other comments before we move on? Nope. So we'll move on to the recommendations. It's just the 2 that's on your papers. Are those agreed? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 5, House and Revenue Account, rent setting and budget strategy. And again, it's Mr Lorimer.
Thank you again, convener. A significant report in the calendar for the committee. So this report sets out the Housing Revenue Account budget strategy for the period 26-27 to 29-30 and seeks approval of the rent levels and associated other charges for financial year 26-27. Now, as members of the committee know, that the Council has a statutory responsibility to ensure that the HRA remains financially sustainable over the short, medium and long term, and that requires a rental income that's sufficient to meet the day-to-day operational costs, as well as to support planned investment in the housing stock and to fund capital financing charges and associated borrowing for new build and major improvement programmes. The proposed revenue budget for 26-27 set out in this report is set out in Appendix 1. In the main, I would say it's very similar to the budget for the current year, but there is a large increase, which we spoke about in the last report, of 3.8 million being proposed in the repairs and maintenance budget in light of experience in the current financial year and the significant cost increases that we've seen for such works. There is a reduction in the capital financed from current revenue, this thing we call CFCR, of about 3.4 million, and that's proposed to partially compensate for the increase in the repairs budget. But by and large, the revenue budget for next year is broadly the same as for the current year. In relation to the capital budget, that is set out in Appendix 3 to the report. It proposes spend of £23 million gross, £18.2 million net of external contributions for next financial year. And then it proposes further spend over the following 3 years of 86 million gross, 66.5 million net. So a significant investment being planned in relation to the council's housing stock, and in that includes new build as well. All of that level of spend over the next 4 years, it's about 64.5 million of new borrowing that's projected to be required to help fund the majority of that level of capital investment. Now, one of the other things this report does in a bit of detail is look at the long-term affordability position, and that really guides the level of capital spend that's affordable and the proposals around rent levels. So for the last, the rent levels for housing are reviewed on an annual basis, as colleagues will know, and as part of that process we do a 30-year affordability assessment to test the affordability, sustainability of the rent levels and the projected expenditure, borrowing requirements and so on. So that latest 30-year assessment is set out in this report. And what it shows is that without above inflation increases in rent levels, the HRA would face a growing gap. There simply wouldn't be enough rental income coming in to meet the operational costs and the planned capital expenditure. Now, for the last several years, that affordability assessment has used a parameter of 25% to guide capital spending decisions. And what that means is that no more than 25% of the revenue resources available would be used to fund borrowing costs. We've had a review of that. We think that's maybe a bit on the low side. So there is a recommendation to increase that parameter to guide, moving forwards from 26/7 onwards, to guide the level of affordability. So what it's saying is, because of the housing, the asset-intensive nature of housing, because of the scale of investment required, there is a need to say, into the future, we're going to use more of the available revenue resources to put towards borrowing cost, and that helps to fund more capital expenditure. In the 30-year modelling, the capital programme, after the current sort of four-year period that I've mentioned, the proposal is to have 20 million of spend on capital, increasing by inflation each year, and that would require, in the modelling, increases in rent after 26/27 of 2% above CPI each year thereafter, assuming CPI is at its target level of 2%, of course. We have done some work around what we think the total spend need might be, and it is above that 20 million. But as Catherine mentioned on the previous report, there's work ongoing to develop the asset management strategy just to get a better feel for what that level of investment would need to be. Moving to the proposed rent increase for 26/27, as is normal, the proposed rent rises have been subject to consultation with tenants. The feedback from that reflected different views, as it usually does. Some tenants recognised the need for a rent increase to continue the investment. Others were concerned about the affordability, etc., etc. Based on all of the revenue and capital budgets proposed in this report, and that includes the substantial capital investment that's planned over that 30-year period, an 8% rise in rents has been recommended for approval, and that was the preferred option through the consultation. An 8% rise is also proposed in relation to the St Christopher's Travelling People's site and the council garages and garage sites. The position for service charges and dispersed rents is a little bit different from the 8% because those are based on actual costs, etc. But the details of that are in Appendix 2. I have tried to summarise there, Convener, as quickly as I can, the main bits of what's in this report, but I appreciate there's a lot of information in there. And again, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Convener. I'm glad you mentioned the St Christopher site there, Ian. I had my questions about engagement with the Gypsy Traveller communities in our area, and I couldn't see any specific outreach or engagement that was done to communicate or engage with the communities for the rent setting. I see that 5 members of the communities contributed to the generic survey. But in terms of the work that COSLA has been doing and engaging with Gypsy Travellers around improving the lives of these communities, I would have liked to have seen or heard of some deeper engagement or, outreach or inreach, however you want to talk about it, on an ongoing basis around these particular surveys that we do, not just the generic Angus Council survey. So it may be some conversations were had with the people who use the site that's not reflected in the equality impact assessment. So I just wanted some feedback on that, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Bell. We do have dedicated resource that works with the residents of the site. We have a housing officer that is dedicated part-time specifically to that site to ensure that we have that ongoing engagement and conversation with residents there. As you say, that hasn't resulted in significantly higher feedback in terms of our rent consultation, but we have had ongoing discussions about improvements to the site, and there is within the capital plan some money set aside to do work within the site on improvement works there, and that is something that we aim to continue to build on. So we do work directly with the residents there to look at what's needed in terms of the site and the improvements that are there. So that's something that we'll do on an ongoing basis and make sure that we continue to strengthen that.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Speed.
Yep, thank you. Before I move on to my question on this report, it was just to say that I did try and get my hand up for a comment on the last one, but I'm not sure if there was maybe a lag in the IT, but it was just to clarify that my question around the overspend was not so much the overspend itself in terms of repairs and maintenance, because I'm aware that sometimes an overspend actually is a true reflection of the spend that's needed. It was more with regards to the asset management system and the delay in being able to implement that. So that's really where I was kind of trying to target my question. But moving on to this report and the rent setting, I'm aware that rent arrears are already high within Angus, and I note within the equality impact assessment that it does highlight that there is difficulties in paying rent for certain groups. And I just wondered if you could confirm what the specific targeted financial support and then early intervention will look like for these groups, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really important point. When the rent increase letters go out, we will be putting specific information in with them in terms of the support that's available for tenants from welfare rights and from other sources, to make sure that people have that information as early as possible and know who to contact if they are experiencing difficulty paying their rent or are looking for help with maximising other benefits that they might receive. There was consideration given in the qualities impact assessment to the difficulties that people might experience in terms of paying rent, and the fact that the 8% increase may contribute further to that. And we specifically have noted that there are some households that impact might be more than others. And so our intention is to take a very targeted approach to tenants that may be experiencing difficulty and make sure that we speak to them as early as possible and are proactive in terms of making contact where people are struggling to pay all or a portion of their rent. I think it's worth highlighting as well, though, that within the quality impact assessment, we've noted there is a positive impact for people from a number of equality groups in terms of the investment that we're planning as a result of the rent increase that we're hoping to have agreed today, and particularly in relation to our ability to deliver new affordable housing with Angus, to continue a programme of aids and adaptations, and also to make improvements to the energy efficiency of our stock. So overall, while we appreciate that this is going to be a difficult rent increase for some people within Angus, and we're very sympathetic to that, we hope that overall there will be a positive impact to our tenants in Angus in terms of improving the stock and the affordability of our housing.
Thank you. Councillor Doran.
Yeah, thank you. My question is relating to the consultation as well. I know you've touched on some parts of that, but the participation in the consultation is still very low. So I just wanted to ask what's being done to support that, and just to kind of talk about the fact that the consultation isn't just about the level of rent setting as well, that it can maybe raise other issues and have other kind of comments around it. So yeah, if you give me a bit more detail, that'd be great.
Yeah, certainly we're aware that the consultation rate has been low, although the consultation rate has been higher for this round of rent setting than it has been in previous years. So there is a positive, and some of the new things that we've tried, such as getting out and about into some of the local supermarkets and being more visible in the area to promote the consultation, that has had an impact. But yeah, the overall engagement has been relatively low. So we'll be reflecting on that over the coming year and before we come into the next set of rent setting, so that we can look at what else we might be able to try. We are shortly going to be launching our next round of satisfaction surveys, so that will be a really good opportunity for us to engage with tenants over a whole range of issues in terms of their experience of being council tenant with us and the service that they're providing. So there'll be a whole raft of questions asked of our tenants at that point, and there'll be an awful lot of opportunity for us to gain information on what's working and what's not working so well, and then reflect on how we improve our service.
Thank you for that, Catherine. I think another positive probably is the fact that we're getting a dedicated comms officer starting soon for housing. So again, hopefully that'll raise the profile next time. Councillor Whiteside.
Yeah, thanks, convener. A couple of things. I was really pleased to see the big increase in capital programme proposed, and my question is probably around, are we confident we've got the staff resource in place to be able to deliver that, because it's so important for delivery of new houses and also the improvement programme for our existing houses. Really exciting to see that. So yeah, question around the staff resource, and maybe a technical one for Ian, just in terms of the affordability assessment. The inflation's predicted to be steady, but the interest rates are predicted to be steadily rising. So just wondered if that was how that worked.
Will I answer the technical one first? Yeah. So we've and that's really why we look at it over a 30-year period, because the interest rates will move around over that period as will inflation. So we've assumed, I think it's 3.29%. As the inflation level on that capital, which we think will give a reasonable amount of protection. As you say, the current projection is that interest rates over the long term, although we expect them to come down in the short term, they've been a bit higher than we would have wanted them to be for a bit longer than we would want to be. So they are expected to come down, but over that period we are expecting them to increase again. And what we're saying is that is affordable over the 30-year period. If interest rates turn out to be lower than that, great, we'll be able to afford more. So I think it's still a pretty prudent projection. If there is some risk in that, it's probably in the construction inflation side, where we have seen costs. It has settled down a bit compared to where it was 2 or 3 years ago, but we have seen that inflation in construction running ahead of general inflation. But I suppose that overall our assumptions on interest rate and inflation are reasonably benign, and we just hope that the economy and world events behave and keep us in that sort of area.
Still you to go.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and in terms of the staff resource, one of the big areas of increase over the next couple of years is in relation to the new build projects that we've got, and as Ewan has already mentioned, we've got a really healthy number of units aiming to be delivered on site over the next couple of years. A lot of the work for that has already been done because we're already well advanced in terms of putting sites together and getting ready to make planning applications. And as we've talked about already, some are already or shortly due to go on site. So that reduces the impact over the coming years in terms of the staff resource that we need. The other element for us is really around that kind of more strategic asset management approach and making sure that we are really clear about what resource we need each year to be able to deliver the projects that we have in the programme, and having that asset management strategy will be a really important part of that and allow us to look at the resources that we have within the team and make sure that we have everything that we need to be able to deliver.
Thanks very much. Questions finished for everybody? We'll move on to comments, please. Any comment? Oh, Lois. Councillor Speed, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Yeah, I just really want to highlight, I guess, the importance of our communication with tenants, tenants that may be struggling to pay their rent. I would like to see other methods of communication rather than just perhaps a letter signposting people as to where to go for help. I think many tenants struggle to sometimes open their mail or to be able to then navigate those kind of complex systems and processes that we have in place. It can be quite challenging for people. So I'd like to see kind of more person-centred kind of support being offered in different ways, especially if people are struggling. And I would also, I think, like us to see kind of being able to provide some assurances to those tenants that are, living in accommodation that isn't suitable for their needs. They're, perhaps already paying rent, but are waiting on repairs, or, are living with kind of damp mould in their properties, or their housing needs just aren't being met. They're perhaps waiting, in a lengthy list to be offered suitable accommodation. And I think it would really be good to send out clear message as to what the housing department hope to be able to achieve with this increase in rent. We can see reports and read reports and have reports in front of us, but for our tenants, I think it's important that those messages are communicated clearly to them to provide some comfort and reassurance, perhaps quite a really difficult time for them to comprehend.
Thank you. Councillor Bond up there. I wasn't
Yes,
sure.
I've now managed to get it up. I was darting between the computer and my my phone, etc., which was confusing me. So it was just to actually make the comment that I've asked the question that I have asked to both Ian and Catherine. I'm sure they'll come back to me, but thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Councillor Boyd. Anybody else with any comments? Councillor Bray.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Yes, when we're setting rent, it's striking a balance, isn't it? If we accept the rent increase that officers are recommending, it's still going to leave us considerably lower than the Scottish average rent. Now, that's a good thing in that it leaves more money in our tenants' pockets, and a lot of that money will be spent in the Angus economy. So that's good. But on the flip side of that, it means that there's less money coming into the housing revenue account to be spent on repairs and maintenance and refurbishments and replenishing our ageing housing stock, all those things, and on staff in the housing service. And, we have to take cognizance of what our tenants think. And that's really important that we get them participating so we have their thoughts on it. And one of the things that this committee is going to have to think about is where are we going in the future with this? how good do we want our stock to be compared to other councils? And, you know, is this in line with what our tenants think? And if you don't get decent levels of participation, you don't really know, and it makes it a wee bit more difficult to make these decisions. So, you know, the more we can do to increase participation, the better. And the wider the knowledge of the housing service and the decisions we have to make among our tenants, then, you know, the better informed they can be, then the better the guidance they can give us as to where they want to go. But we've also to remember that this housing service isn't just here for one generation of tenants. It's supposed to go on basically forever and ever. We have to keep in mind what future generations of tenants will need as well as want. So, about balance, isn't it? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brace. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, just coming back to what Councillor Speed was talking about, as tenant participation spokesperson, I just want to highlight the work that's been done. There's been a huge amount of work done this year in terms of getting out and meeting more of the tenants, offering walkabouts, and there's a programme getting planned for next year as well. We've got the tenant representatives on the Housing Committee. I think we've got one of them online today. We are making an effort to get out to as many people in as many different ways as possible, which is always positive. And sometimes the turnout is disappointing at these events, but hopefully it will build speed over the years as people get used to them, and we'll see them growing as we go. In terms of the rent, Councillor Brace mentioned the context. We are still one of the lowest rents around. We're lower than all the social housing providers in Angus. We're significantly lower than Dundee rents and Perth and Kinross rents, for example. So even although we're having the same rent increase as Dundee, it isn't the same because they're starting from a much higher base, and their average rent increase for 8% is over £7 a week, whereas ours is £5.45, I think it was. So just to keep things in context, it is worrying when prices go up for people, but we have to keep it in context. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. I'll just probably add a comment myself. I mean, 8% is the lowest option on the consultation, and 8% is the minimum required to support the current levels of investment. I think what was striking was 83% of our housing stock is more than 50 years old. So repairs are more complex, you know, and they do cost significantly more than newer housing. And I think we also need to invest in making our homes more energy efficient, lowering utility bills. And in 2022, a rent increase of 1% resulted in Angus Council not being able to build. And this year's rent increase will allow us to invest in new homes. Whilst we recognise this difficult year for many, this is one-off more substantial increase is essential to secure our long-term financial stability and avoid the need for sharper increases in the future. So sadly, it is where we are, and you know, it's to be welcomed. There's been a lot of investment, certainly in my ward in Brechin, on new windows. I mean, we're just at the window stage. The feedback has been absolutely phenomenal. So if we can do things like that for our tenants, then it can only be a good thing. Thank you. We'll move on now to the recommendations, and there is 7 in front of you. So are they agreed? Thank you very much. And item number 6 is the Housing Service Performance and Improvement Progress Report, and that is going to be Catherine that's introducing. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. This report is the Housing Service Performance and Improvement Report, and members are asked to review and scrutinise progress against our Housing Service Improvement Plan, which was agreed here at committee in September. The report outlines the delivery against our key priorities of customer excellence, quality of housing in place, prevention and homelessness, and all of which are underpinned by our digital roadmap. Overall, the report demonstrates that while There are areas where we're still continuing to see pressure. We're now showing some steady and sustained improvement, particularly in relation to our repairs service, despite that increased demand that we've seen earlier, and also our voids and communication with tenants. And I welcome any questions.
Okay, I don't know who was first. Was that Councillor Devine?
Hey, that makes a change. This is a very long report, and I wonder if I could ask 3 quite short questions. The answers might not be as short, but would that be okay, convener? Okay, thank you. The first one's on page 71. It's just that there's a pilot. They're piloting a digital councillor inquiry form for housing and social work inquiries. I was wondering if there's been any elected members involved with that pilot, just to see what's being done and how we would view that. That would be really helpful. And then on page 80, on the last box, actually, we've been talking about voids, and we've been talking about voids for a long time, and we're still having problems getting the contracts done. Now, I do see that preparatory work is underway in getting the contracts ready. I just wondered what the possible start date might be for that, because we really are wanting this done more quickly than is likely, actually. Now, 93. Oh, this is just about the SLA with welfare rights. I just wondered if that had actually started. There's been reviewed, and it was supposed to be starting in January, so hopefully it has started. That are my 3 questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your questions, Councillor Devine. In terms of the digital inquiry form, Lindsay, are you able to give an update on terms of where we're at with that?
Thanks for that. Yeah, so that's in very early planning stages at the minute. So the plan is to bring together elected members to support with the development of that and to help test that before it's piloted. So we will be in touch looking for volunteers to support us with that work.
And in terms of the repairs and maintenance contract, there was a report that came to P&R committee recently looking to get approval to start that tender process, and that was also looking for approval for a 6-month extension of the existing contract. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to deliver it within that time frame, but it is likely that we are going to have to apply some sort of extension to our current contracts, which come up for renewal at the end of March. But that 6-month extension we anticipate will be sufficient to be able to deliver the new contract. So we would be hopeful that they would be in place certainly by October of this year is the current timeline. In terms of the question about welfare rights, this is more in terms of how we articulate that, the agreement that we have and the way that the service is delivered between the 2 services, so between housing and the welfare rights service. We already have a really good relationship with welfare rights, and housing gives a reasonable contribution to the staff resource that sits within the welfare rights service, and that advice happens on an ongoing basis. So there isn't any planned change to the way that the advice is given and the resource that's available within welfare rights, and this is about formalising the agreement for how housing pays for that resource within welfare rights. So it's more around the kind of technicalities of how we set out that agreement.
Thanks. I was just concerned that there might be a bit of a gap there, but it doesn't sound as if there would be. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener. I'm hoping to squeeze in 2 small questions, if that's all right, so it's fewer than Lynn. The first one on page 71 around the house exchange and mutual exchange policies. I was recently involved in a situation that involved a mutual exchange, but between Angus and a different local authority, which brought about a significant set of challenges, shall we say, and I just wondered if that had been taken into account in the new policy. And also on page 91, it kind of jumped out in me around the domestic abuse policy, just some assurance that it aligns with Equally Safe. And that also made me think it might be helpful to have links to policies like SURE, for example, or, you know, other legal strategies and documents for cross-reference, just a bit of comfort around Equally Safe particularly. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the mutual exchange, I mean, we have a policy that's in place, and the action in here is more around the communication and how we promote the availability of mutual exchange with our tenants. But if you've got specific feedback that you want to give us in terms of gaps or things that have or haven't worked well, then absolutely we'd be more than happy to look at that.
So I think the officers involved will have that. So I'll maybe just drop you an email and copy everyone in.
That would be good, thank you. The domestic abuse, we have been doing a lot of work in terms of our approach to domestic abuse and the policies that sit alongside that. There's still work in progress, but they are very much looking at the national programmes and also the work that's going on right across Tayside in terms of the response, and that is all taken into account in our local policies.
Thanks very much. Councillor Don.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I think it's page 72, 73, under the risks in the table, there is one which is flagged as high risk, which is around limited staff capacity to deliver consistent customer service. So I just wanted to ask a bit more about how that plans to resolve that. And I think that also relates to some of the complaints which are further down in the next, maybe in the next report actually, about responses to that as well. So if you could answer that, would be great. Thanks.
This is something that we're actively managing in terms of potential risks to service delivery. We are not in a position at the moment that we have identified any major current issues in terms of the staff capacity to be able to deliver the frontline service, but the reason that we have that highlighted in there is because we're aware of the potential that should things change, that there could be further issues that we need to respond to. So the reason that is in there as a major high is really to make sure that it's at the forefront of our planning and response should there be any issues that we need to respond to.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. Just a question around the void re-let times. The void numbers have come down quite a bit, which is really, really good to see, but the re-let times appear to be increasing. So I wonder if you could just give us a bit of information around that, please.
Yes, certainly. It's a really important distinction in terms of our void performance, because there are a number of different factors that we monitor, and they don't all move on the same trajectory. So when we see an increase in the void relet times, that's because the properties that are being relet at that time have been void for a longer period, and that would indicate that our the work that we're doing to improve our void performance is having an impact, because those properties that have been void for a long period time are now coming back into use. And so our expectation was that as we improved our void performance, we would see an increase in the void relet times, because those properties that have been void for longest are then coming back into use. So that's one of those performance indicators that we're actually quite happy to see, although it doesn't necessarily on the face of it look like it's a positive trend. It does actually show that we're having an impact.
Thanks. Councillor Speed.
Yep, thank you, Convener. So yeah, I've got a few small questions to squeeze in. The first was on the kind of customer charter and service standards, and just why the service is perhaps not meeting these standards, and I think a little bit of that has been touched on. My other query was around the refusal rates remaining high within the choice-based letting system. As you know, I've raised concerns previously about choice-based letting. I note that the feedback is that perhaps the refusal is due to the location being unacceptable. And that's just a continuation on from before we switched to choice-based letting, but yet choice-based letting was meant to kind of solve some of this. I just wondered if I could get a bit of feedback on that. And my other query was in relation to kind of social media and the figures on Facebook for housing, on the housing blog post. So it says 83,000 views on the housing blog post and 79,000 views on Facebook. And I just wondered if that information is based on just the amount of times it's come up on someone's feed, or is that the amount of times someone's read it? It just seems considerably high. I just wondered if, we had any kind of data on that as to what those figures actually mean in reality for people.
Thanks, Councillor Speed. I'll touch on the customer charter first, and this is something that we've introduced in relatively recent times in terms of measuring how we're performing against the customer charter. And you're right that we're not meeting it as much in as many cases as we would like to. There are a couple of reasons for that, and one of them we think comes down to reporting and when our staff are closing it down as a response, whether or not we're waiting until we have got a final response to a full inquiry, or whether or not we're making an initial response to somebody so that we're getting back to them to let them know that we're looking into a situation. And often we're not closing down the inquiry in terms of giving an initial response. We're waiting until we've got that full response, which we think is affecting the timescales that we're reporting here. So that's something that we're working on at the moment to make sure that we are reporting that accurate data. But it's also something that we need to look at in terms of the information that we are giving to customers and the expectations that we're setting to them in terms of when they can expect a response from us, and making sure that we are in a position where we can get much closer to 100% in as many cases as possible. So that one is definitely a work in progress for us. In terms of choice-based letting, you're right that we are still seeing a fairly high number of refusals, and the reasons for those are mixed. We have made a commitment that we will review choice-based letting towards the end of the 3-year period of the improvement plan, and that's something that we still are fully planning to undertake. I think we've all set out the reasons, and I think we all understand that there are improvements that we need to make to the current way that we're approaching the system, and particularly the improvements that we're going to make to the system and bringing in the changes to the allocation policy, which will help us better understand what changes we need to make that are really going to make the most difference for our tenants and our applicants. So I think making that change now without that full suite of information would not necessarily lead us to a better position than the one that we're in now. We want to make sure that we've got that full suite of information and that everything is running as smoothly as possible before we implement any changes. But we are absolutely committed to doing that review within the 3-year period. And in terms of the social media, can I just bring Lindsay Day in on that one to give you a bit more information about what sits behind the data?
Hi, thanks Catherine, thanks Councillor Speed. Yes, so these are high-level stats that were provided by the communications team, so we'd need to go back and confirm with them whether that actually means that the posts have been read, viewed, or if they've appeared in feeds and things. So I'll get that clarified and come back to everyone. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor Melville.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to return to voids again. We know that energy meter debt can be a big issue in terms of getting voids turned around. And obviously people are really struggling with the cost of electricity at the moment. It would just be good, I think, to get a picture of the scale of that problem here in Angus and what percentage of our voids, or a figure for how many of our voids are either directly because of or involving energy meter debt and the difficulties in getting that resolved.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That is something that we have experienced in the past as a significant issue, but in recent times we introduced a contract with Energy Angels, who were able to provide a frontline service for us that enables us to vastly speed up the amount of time it takes for us to take over, or for the energy company to take over the meter and clear the debt. So that is much less of a problem for us now than it has been in the past, and it's also taken up significantly less staff resource to be able to deal with those issues. So we're pleased to say that that is an improvement.
Do we have a ballpark figure for roughly how many of the voids are still in that situation?
I don't have that here, but I can certainly get more information on that for you.
Thanks very much, everybody. Anybody got any comments to make? Oh, Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I was actually going to try and I'll put it as a comment, but it was really a question. On the table, there's the status, and there's an awful lot that are in progress. Would it not be more helpful to put the percentage, how far we've got through, or perhaps the expected delivery date? Because when you see a whole lot of actions where it says in progress, you don't know, are we 5% along the road or 95%? I think that would be helpful. Just maybe the date, we hope to do this by December 26 or whatever, that would, for me, be a bit more meaningful. It was really more of a question, but I've made it as a comment.
Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, convener. Just very briefly, there's so much in this report that you could comment on a lot of things, but we hear quite a lot of comments about the problems with the repair service. So it's really good to see the improvement in the repairs that are right first time. So well done.
Councillor Don.
Thank you. Yeah, following on a similar theme to Councillor Duff on the table, I just wanted to comment on how useful it is to have all of this laid out and to see the scale and to see the information underpinning it. And I think that just underlines how important this committee is and the steps taken to kind of make the steps where we need to make them and focus on areas and highlight where that focus needs to be to move things forward. So I think it's really helpful, and I would agree with Councillor Duff on having some kind of, now this is in place, adding some dates or percentages to where we are would be really helpful for tracking things going forward.
That must be the scientists, and yeah, I don't want all that. Councillor Gregg. Councillor Speed first and then Melville, sorry.
Yeah, I just really want to finish with a comment that I feel kind of echoes and reflects kind of my housing casework, and a lot of the challenges that tenants and applicants kind of report to me in terms of kind of pure communication, trying to navigate complex systems and processes, difficulties with choice-based letting and raised expectation and long wait times, and just can't underestimate how difficult it is for people who are perhaps waiting on a repair or are waiting to be rehoused. I know that the frontline staff in particular do work hard to try and keep up with the demand and to address people's concerns, but yeah, we definitely are still in that housing crisis, and it is an area that I will continue to advocate for in terms of improvements and in terms of being able to support people not just through participation but in ways that reflect their support needs and what they need to be able to successfully make an application, or indeed be able to carry through with a house move, which in itself is a huge upheaval for an individual or a family. And we can't underestimate just how difficult even a house move is, albeit it can often be a joyous time when someone's waited. I'd probably just want to finish as well with a closing comment. It's something that I didn't manage to fit into my questions, but I'm sure will be looked at, and that is just that within the papers, the new allocation policy, it states, will be implemented in April 2025. I'm assuming that should be April 2026, and I'm hoping that obviously we're on target for being able to implement in 2026. Thank you.
Councillor Melville.
Yes, thanks, convener. I'm particularly pleased to see the progress on digital direct debits. Members will recall this is something that I have been pushing for some time. And though it's early doors, to have over 100 tenants signed up already is very welcome indeed. And I'm glad that the rents team are helping people to get in the new system as well. So hopefully that progress will continue, because we do need to try and make things as easy for tenants as humanly possible. And I'm hopeful that the new Housing Communications Officer will help to promote that system as well.
Thanks very much for that. So anybody else, or we're all done? We'll go to the recommendations, and there's just the one recommendation in front of you. Is that agreed? Thank you. So moving on to number 7, the Common Repairs Policy, and it's Catherine that's going to introduce.
Thank you, convener. This report seeks approval for the introduction of a Common Repairs Policy, which sets the framework for works in mixed tenure areas. The proposed policy ensures that we have a consistent approach which aligns with relevant legislation, benefiting both our ability to carry out repairs on our own properties in mixed tenure areas, while also ensuring that private owners have a clear understanding of what to expect from us, including when they wish to lead a repair in a block where we are a common owner. The policy looks to set a cap on fees that will be charged to owners where they are participating in a common repair, and the policy is set out in the appendix. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. Any questions, anybody? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. It is about the owner engagement and the private owners, or, well, possibly landlords, in fact. And I'm not quite clear what happens if an owner is determined not to have the work done or to pay for it, which I think does happen fairly regularly.
Yeah, thanks for your question. The position very much varies depending on the ownership proportion that we hold and whether or not we are a minority or a majority owner. And where we are a majority owner, the legislation is very clear around our position in terms of being able to carry out repairs where we have that agreement, or even where there are a majority of other owners also agreeing to carry out the repair. Either the title deeds or the Tenement Scotland Act in most cases would allow us to proceed even if there is one or more owners that isn't willing to. And we've set out the policy in terms of how we would invoice and how we would recover monies if we're in a position where we need to pay upfront for works. But it certainly is a challenge. The reason for bringing the policy is very much to give us that framework so that our staff are much clearer about the route to take in terms of pursuing owners to carry out repairs, and that also we're in a much stronger position where we need to recover monies.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. If not, we'll move on to comments. Anybody got any comments to make? Nope. So we'll move on to the recommendations then. Let me just get my page turned. So there is 3 recommendations. Are those agreed? Thank you very much. And moving on to the last one, item 8, surplus property, Warncliffe Hall and former library in Newtile.
Thank you. This report seeks approval for the HRA to dispose of the former library at 8 Castle Street in Newtile. You'll see from the report that the library is adjoined to the Warncliffe Hall, which is a general fund asset, and it is surplus to the requirements of the Housing Revenue account. If approved today, this will also be considered at Policy and Resources Committee to consider disposal of the hall, and therefore both can be considered as taken forward together, hopefully providing a good proposition to bring these properties back into use.
Thanks very much. Anybody got any questions on that? Nope. Any comments? Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Yeah, I support this approach. I'm very aware of the engagement that's happened in the community around the potential future uses of these properties, and I think it's come to a point where this is the route ahead. So I'm very happy to support it. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks very much. Anybody else for any other comments, or shall we just move on to the recommendations? Yep. So there's just one recommendation. It's recommended that the Housing Committee agrees that the former library at 8 Castle Street, Newtile, be declared surplus to requirements and offered on the open market for sale, jointly with the adjoining Warncliffe Hall, Church Street, Newtile, on terms to be agreed by the Director of Infrastructure and Environment. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming today.